Hello friend, welcome back to my kitchen. My name is Becky if you're new, and today we're not gonna be cooking in the traditional sense. Today we're gonna be cooking up soap. We're gonna make two different soap recipes out of this soap book. When I mentioned a while back I wanted to get into soap making, so many of you recommended this book. It's called The Simple and Natural Soap Making Book by Jan Berry, and I'm so glad that you all recommended this. I purchased this, and we're gonna make two of the soaps out of this book. At its most basic, soap is fat and lye. So we are going to be making a lard soap. It is on page 37, and it's called the old-fashioned lye soap. This is one of the most traditional soaps that's been made throughout history, and I want to go ahead and just make just a really simple soap. Once we make that today, then we are going to make the classic oatmeal and milk and honey soap on page 80. I want to make the simple one first, and then we're going to make the one that's a little bit more involved. The reason I love this book is it really breaks it down into 3 different categories, and I will link this book along with all the soap making equipment that I'm going to be using today down in the description box. Part 1 is getting started, and it just walks you through the different steps of soap making and what you need to do and the equipment you need in order to make soap, how to do it safely, and all those good things. Part 2 is all the recipes, and there are tons of recipes in here. There's recipes to make soap from your herb garden, soap from your orchard or vegetable garden, soap from the farm, soap from the sea, soap from the apothecary, and soap from the forest. So there's recipes in here how to make heirloom tomato soap, pumpkin soap, mint coffee soap, and I am really excited to dive into the world of soap making. Part 3 is techniques and tips to take your soap making to the next level. So it's how to kind of customize soap for your own needs and desires. And then part 4 is troubleshooting, and it's just a really cool book. And so we're gonna make two, we're gonna follow the recipes out of these books today. I read through part 1, the safety tips and techniques, before I dove into this. I've also reread my recipe that I'm gonna be making multiple times today to make sure I've got a good grasp of what I'm gonna be doing. So when it comes to soap making, you do want to make sure that you do wear proper safety equipment. So I've got safety glasses, I have a long sleeve shirt on, and then we've got gloves. So today, you're just coming along with me as we make the soap. And I will share with you at the end how it turns out. So we will let it cure for the 6 weeks, and then we will test the soap out and compare one with the other. Because the different additives and oils and things you put in your soap create a different type of bar. Some might be have a lot more lather, some might be harder, some might be softer, some might be more nourishing to the skin. Just depends on what you add into it. So that's why I kind of wanted to make 2 today so that we've got a good compare and contrast. Jan's recipes come in grams or ounces. I'm gonna use grams today to measure out our lye, water, and oils because I find I can be a little bit more precise than with ounces. When making soap, you want to be very, very precise. So I'm gonna tear this, and you wanna make soap in stainless steel or plastic, a very certain kind of plastic. I don't have plastic bowls, so I've got my stainless steel bowl here. And I have this tiered. I have my safety glasses on, and it says 0 grams. The first thing we need to do is pour our distilled water into our bowl, and we need to measure out 248 grams. Perfect. I'm gonna set my bowl aside, and now we're gonna measure out our lye. I'm gonna tear this. Working with lye is something you want to make sure that you've got your full attention and you've got your safety equipment on, because you can hurt yourself with it. So I'm gonna measure out the proper amount of lye according to this recipe. And once you use something for soap making, you want to dedicate that to soap making. So all the equipment that I'm going to be using today, including the bowls and spatulas and my immersion blender, are going to be now my soap making bowls and spatulas. I was looking up the history of soap, and it dates back to 2500 BC. And when people would first start making soap, they would just boil whatever kind of fat or oil they had. A lot of times it was tallow, so the fat from sheep and cows, or lard from pigs. And then they would boil that with wood ash, because wood ash contains lye, and that is how they would make soap. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna very carefully pour my correctly measured out amount of lye. I'm just gonna double check that just to make sure I double check my numbers. And now I'm very carefully gonna pour this powdered lye into my water. And a chemical reaction is gonna happen. This water is going to heat up, and I have my windows open because it's gonna create fumes, and I want a nice, well-ventilated area. My lye has now dissolved in my water, and this was room temperature water when I started, and the chemical reaction from the lye and the water has now heated this water up to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set this in the center of my island, and we need this to cool down to between 100 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And so in the meantime, we can measure out our oils. Now, I use this container to measure out my lye, and this is now gonna be my dedicated lye measuring container. And what the book says to do is mark this with a skull and crossbones and write what it is on here, so that you don't use this for anything other than lye. And anyone could recognize what a skull and crossbones means. I'm not the best artist, but it gets the job done. And when you're doing this, you don't want any children or anything around, because this is definitely something that needs to be respected, and it could be dangerous if you got that on your skin or anybody's skin. So I'm gonna set this aside because we're gonna use that again when we measure out our lye for our honey and oat milk soap recipe. So now let's go ahead and measure out the essential oils. I am choosing to use an essential oil in this recipe. You could use none and have this be unscented, but I am going to just go ahead and follow this recipe exactly as it says, because I want to get comfortable following a recipe and doing what someone else tells me to do, so that I can get comfortable with the process, and then I can take this book and what's in this book and start to make my own recipes. But for now, we're gonna do exactly what this recipe says. And this recipe calls for both lavender and tea tree. And I'm just gonna go ahead and pour it because we're gonna need quite a bit. The cool thing about this book is in the back of it is it gives a bunch of recipes for different essential oil mixes. And it talks about the pros and cons of the different essential oils and how they react in soap. I'm gonna go ahead and tear this. And now we're gonna add our tea tree. I got these essential oils on Amazon. I just looked for 100% pure essential oils. If you have a brand that you're loyal to, you could use those. I'm not. So now I'm gonna set this aside, and now we're gonna measure out our fat for this recipe, which is lard, which I melted in the microwave. So I've got another stainless steel bowl with my melted, almost melted lard. The cool thing about this book too is she talks about the different types of fat that go into soap and their different properties and how they affect soap. And eventually you can learn to make your own soap recipes. But I just want to get comfortable with the actual process of making soap. I might need to get another jar of lard out, because this is not going to be enough, which is fine because I have a lot of lard. Okay, got some more melted lard. And there we go. I'm taking the temperature of my fat, and I have 110 degrees Fahrenheit on this lard, and I've got 95 degrees Fahrenheit on my lye solution. So now we can go ahead and actually make our soap. Soap is made when lye reacts with fat. It's called sponification. There's a chemical reaction that happens that turns fat into soap. And it's so important that you measure this out correctly so that in the end, your bar of soap does not have too much lye left over. You want all the lye to react with the fat so that you don't have any lye left over. So I'm very carefully pouring the lye water solution into my oil. The author of this book states that she does keep her soaps a little bit on the fattier side, meaning that there is a little bit of leftover fat after the soap is made so that it doesn't dry out your skin, and it leaves a little bit of margin. If you have the exact amount of fat to lye needed to turn the lye into soap, then you could be left with a little bit too much lye in the soap, and then it could be kind of harsh on the skin. So now what I'm gonna do is gently using a spatula mix that lye water solution in with the lard. And once I've done this for a little bit, I'm gonna pull out my hand blender, and we're gonna go ahead and blend this with the hand blender, and we're looking for what is called trace. Basically, where when you take a spoon and you dribble it across the top, it leaves a trace indent on the top. I've made soap 3 times, and 2 times they have been complete failures, and 1 time it turned out. So I am committed to learning how to make soap well and not get ahead of myself. So take my time, go slow, follow the directions. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is grab my hand blender, and this is now a dedicated soap blender. This can just speed up the process. You can just use a spatula and keep mixing if you want, but this will make it go a little bit faster. What I'm gonna do before I turn this on is I'm gonna put this blender in at an angle. You see those air bubbles that just came up? I don't want an air bubble in there when I turn it on. Now I'm gonna hold it at the bottom and turn it on low. So it is starting to thicken up just a little bit, but when I drag the blender over the top, I'm not seeing any traces left behind. So I think we're there. So now I'm gonna take my spatula and scrape off all of this goodness, because that's all soap, or I don't actually know if this is now officially soap or if it has to cure before it's called soap. Now we're gonna take our essential oils, mix that in there. Get all that goodness. And now I'm just gonna use my spatula to stir in the essential oils. And I'm not gonna put any coloring or anything in it. This is just gonna be a nice white bar of soap that's tea tree and lavender. It already smells incredible. The essential oils, when it hit this oil, really just brought out their aroma, and it's delicious. Almost feels like that thinned it out a little bit. Let's see what it says to do next. At trace, stir in the essential oils if using. Pour the soap batter into the prepared mold and cover with a sheet of wax paper or freezer paper, then a towel or light blanket. Okay. I did go ahead and purchase molds for these. When I've made soap in the past, I just used what I had on hand, but I do want to get into soap making more, so I thought it was time to go ahead and purchase the proper equipment. And these are the size molds that one of her recipes fills. So she designs all of her recipes to fill in one of these molds. We're gonna get all this goodness out of this bowl. As royalty soaps would say, we're gonna scrapey my containy. I think that's what she says. I used to watch her videos all the time. We're gonna get all this beautiful soap into this mold. So now we have our loaf of soap that I'm going to go ahead and put over here on this counter. And I'm going to cover like this. And then to insulate this, because the chemical reaction is still happening, I'm going to cover it with a blanket just to keep it a little warmer. We did it, friend. I think this is gonna turn out. Nothing weird happened in the process, so as long as this sets up and cures properly, we officially just finished our first easy soap. So now what I'm gonna do is wash all of the equipment that I just used, and I am going to continue to wear my safety equipment while I wash out my bowls and stuff, and we're gonna reset to make the old-fashioned honey and oat milk soap. This next one is Josh's favorite type of soap. And so I'm really excited to see if I can get this one to turn out. So let me wash my bowls and then we will reset and make the second soap. This is the soap we just made, and this is the soap that we're gonna be making next. I wish you could smell it in here. The essential oils that I used have just permeated this room and it smells fantastic. So now what I'm gonna do is get all my safety equipment on, and I'm gonna go ahead and measure out what I need for the different components of this soap. So this is a honey milk soap. So the first thing I did actually before I got ready today is I actually weighed out the milk and I stuck it in the freezer so that it's frozen. And now what I'm gonna do is measure out the honey. And the reason you wanna work with frozen milk, from what I was reading in the book, is that sugars in milk can actually scorch when they react with the lye, and you obviously don't want that. So if you start with frozen milk, you're less likely to have that. So here I'm gonna put a teaspoon of honey into this glass bowl, along with a teaspoon of distilled water. I'm gonna mix that up, and that is going to be our honey mixture. We're gonna put this in at the end. We want that honey to dissolve in that water. Okay, now I'm gonna set this aside. And we need to weigh out our oats, and we need to grind our oats. So I'm gonna use my mortar and pestle and take that off. And we're gonna make a fine powder out of our oats. Set that aside. So now we're gonna measure out our lye into our little container here. This is where I've got all my safety equipment on, and you wanna be very, very careful. No pets or children around. Perfect. Just like in the previous recipe, we're gonna need our lye mixture to cool before we add it to our oils. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the lye mixture mixed up so it can heat up and then cool back down, and then we'll measure out our oils. And so we need to actually add some water in here. So I'm gonna go ahead and tare this. Only a little bit of water. Again, this is distilled water. Double check that. I'm double checking every time I measure just to make sure I do the correct amount. We need 1 more gram of water. It's perfect, right on the dot there. Now I'm gonna get my pre-measured out frozen milk that I measured out this morning and froze this morning. I just ran that under some hot water for about 2 seconds and bam, that pops right out. So now this is where this is a little bit different than the previous recipe. The reason I froze this in 2 separate pucks is just to make sure it would freeze quicker. So now what we're gonna do is slowly sprinkle in our lye over top of our milk. And as the chemical reaction happens, it's gonna heat up and melt our milk. So our milk is now dissolved into our lye and water. And I want to take its temperature. And it is only 92 degrees Fahrenheit. So as soon as we get our oils mixed together, we'll be able to incorporate this into our oils. This recipe uses 3 different fats to make up the soap. The first one is lard. There are directions on here if you want to make this vegan and you don't want to use lard, you don't have to. I'm using it because I have an abundance of it that I was able to get from a local farmer. So we're going to do equal parts. I need to pay attention so I do this correctly. Of lard, and I put a little too much in there. Perfect. To coconut oil, and I need to melt my coconut oil. So I'm gonna set this aside, put 0 on there, grab a new spoon, because I'm gonna actually have to get into my coconut oil. I'm getting this glass bowl out just to put this in the microwave so that I can melt this so that it's liquid. Did I tear it? This smells really good. Again, I'm doing grams just because I feel like I can get a little bit more precise on it, and that is exactly what we need right there. So I'm just gonna pop this in the microwave for probably about a minute. So I'm gonna add my melted coconut oil to my lard, and I have a new spatula here, one that has not touched lye at all. And I'm gonna get this into this bowl. Again, I'm not measuring out my fats into a glass bowl to then make the actual soap because I don't wanna add lye to glass because it could break because of the chemical reactions. So that's why we're using this stainless steel. So now, the last oil we're gonna use in this recipe is olive oil. And you can use essential oils in this recipe. She writes down how many grams of essential oils you would use in this recipe if you want to use essential oils. But I want the honey and the oat and the milk to shine through, so I'm not going to use any sort of scent. This is gonna be an unscented one. And let me double check here. 397. 397. I'm gonna go really slow. Right there, 397, perfect. I wanted to reread my recipe one more time before I mixed my lye solution in with my oil. And I'm glad I did, because it talks about the gel phase. The gel phase is a natural reaction that happens when soap is being made after you pour it into your mold. And when you're making soaps with milk and honey, because of the higher sugar content, it says that soaps made with milk and honey, other ingredients containing natural sugars will turn various shades of brown when they go through the gel phase. Soaps that don't contain milk and honey, when they go through the gel phase, if they contain natural colorants like clays and things, it can actually deepen the color. So sometimes when you're making soap, you want your soap to go through that gel phase, and sometimes you don't. And she said to get the color that's on this picture, Jan said here she had it go through the gel phase. I like this color, so let's mix this up and see what color we get, and if we want it to stay this color or if we're okay with it being a little bit darker. To prevent the gel phase, you want your soaps to cure or cool at a cooler temperature. So instead of putting it under the blanket, you would pop it in the refrigerator and let it harden in the refrigerator. So let's check the temperatures of these real quick. Our oil is 78 degrees, so just above room temperature. And our milk and lye is 84 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour my lye milk mixture into my oil. Scraping the bowl to get all of the contents into our oil. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before, where I'm going to start by stirring these two mixtures together with my spatula. Now I'm going to go in with my immersion blender, and again I'm going to go in, debubble it. So I'm going to go to the side, turn it on low. We're getting close, but we're not quite there. I think we're there because I can see where I'm leaving a trace behind. So I'm going to go ahead and scrape off my immersion blender from all this goodness. I love the color of this light yellow color. I think that's from the olive oil. Now we're going to add our honey that we mixed with our water. Get all that goodness out of there. And our crushed oats. Mix all this together. This is where it would be fun to do 2 batches or to have smaller molds and have half of them go through the gel phase and the other half not, just so you can kind of see how the soap reacts. Okay, I think that is perfect. Our honey is mixed in, our oats are mixed in. Let's see if I can do this without making a mess this time. While I was mixing up this soap, I was trying to decide if I wanted this to go through the gel phase, which means I would let it sit out at room temperature, or if I didn't want it to and I wanted to keep it this light color, I would pop it into the refrigerator, Well, the bar of soap that Josh and I really like that is a milk and honey oat bar is pretty dark. It's not this light yellow color. So oh wow, this is warm from this soap reacting. I can feel it on this blanket. So I want this soap to go through the gel phase because I want it to darken up a little bit like the soap that we purchased that Josh and I like to use. So I'm just gonna put this piece of parchment paper over and this over. And I'm supposed to check on this let me look at my recipe. Peek at the soap every so often. If it starts to develop a crack, move it to a cooler location. Soap that keeps cool and doesn't go through the gel phase will be lighter in color than soap that goes through the gel phase. So we are having the soap go through the gel phase. Keep the soap in the mold for 2 to 3 days or until easy to remove. Then slice it into bars when it is firm enough not to stick to your cutting tool. Cure for 4 weeks. Oh, so this one only has to cure for 4 weeks. The first one we made only has to cure for 4 weeks. I thought they had to cure for 6 weeks. And the first one we made needs to sit and harden for a day or two before we can cut into it. So I'm really excited about that. I feel like I was able to follow these directions. I think they're gonna turn out. Slow and steady when learning a new skill, especially something like this, is going to pay off in the end. And I was just looking, it's cool because these recipes kind of describe what the different ingredients are and how they are beneficial. So I'm pretty excited about this. So we are just gonna let those sit there. We will be back when we unmold those and cut them. And then I will be back when we get to run them underwater and actually see how they lather and see if we like one or the other better. I just peeked under the blanket and I don't have any cracking with our oatmeal soap, or maybe a tiny little bit right there, but this is the gel phase starting. So I think I'm gonna put this in a little bit of a cooler area just so that we don't continue to get that crack. This soap looks beautiful. It's the next morning and you can see that I believe this soap has completely gone through the gel phase. This is our oat honey soap. What I did to slow down that reaction is I went ahead and I put this in the garage where it was about 55 degrees, so a little bit cooler, so that crack that had started, it didn't get any bigger. So now I'm just gonna let this sit for another day or two and then we'll slice into it. It is about 5 days later and we get to finally cut into our soap. So I just have not got around to cutting into it. I'm really looking forward to this, so I'm glad that today is the day we are gonna cut into it. I've got a ruler and a knife, and I don't have any special soap cutting equipment, but I do wanna try to make these bars as even as possible. It smells incredible. The last few times I've made soap, I never put near this amount of essential oils in it, and it smells so good. I think that I've always put too little essential oils to really get a good fragrance. Look how beautiful this bar is. So this is the lard soap right here. Put this back in our, and look how beautiful that is. It smells divine. So now what I want to do, so this is a 10-inch bar. So maybe we'll do 1-inch bars. That seems like a good size. So what I need to do is mark each end. Now I have notches on each side of the bar. And there we have it, our first bar of soap. To be completely honest, I was a little bit worried that I waited too long to cut into these bars of soap, but I think it is totally fine that I waited 5 days, maybe it's been 6 days since I actually made this soap. So I'm just lining this up on a cooling rack. This is where this soap is gonna live for the next at least 4 weeks. Well, now it's only 3.5 weeks because we can test it out in 3.5 weeks. And I'm gonna go ahead and cut into our oatmeal soap. So this one just has a really nice, mild fragrance to it. It's a little bit sweet. You can smell the oatmeal, which is kind of surprising. And you can smell the milk, which doesn't smell sour at all. It smells super, super sweet. And that's wonderful. I'm glad that I did not add any fragrance to this. Now, just touching the outside of this bar, I can tell that it's a little bit stickier than this one because this one does have olive oil in it, which is a softer oil. And I'm gonna go ahead and try to be a little bit better actually about my measurements on this. I think if I have my ruler just sitting there instead of bending down, I might be able to get a little bit more accurate notches. I think if I use a smaller knife, I'll have a little bit more control as well. So you can see the oatmeal flecks in that. Yeah, this is definitely a little bit stickier. I like the color it turned out. You can see the color difference between the two. None of these have any sort of color additives to it. You can see where it's a little bit darker around the outside. Let's see, can you see that? There's a little darker edge around the outside. I think once it sits and cures, it'll all turn into the same color. Oh, that's really nice. I wonder if that's a little bit of honey or something that didn't fully get mixed in. See a little bit of color variance there. We got 20 bars of soap. And now what I'm gonna do is just let these sit on this rack for at least 4 weeks. I'll probably give it 4 solid weeks from today, and then we will test it out. But so far, so good. This is significantly harder already than this one because it has 100% lard versus lard, olive oil, and coconut oil. So I will see you back when we get to test these out. Friend, it has been 5 weeks since we made this soap. Actually, it's been a little bit longer, and I am so excited to go ahead and try both of these. Let's go ahead and try the lard one first. This is the pure lard soap with just some essential oils in it, and it's very, very firm at this point. This morning I had to look in my book what oils we put into the oat milk soap one because I couldn't remember, it had been so long. Okay, so let's see how this lathers. So this is pure lard soap. There's not much sudsing to it, but it feels really good on the hands. It's nice and firm. Like, it doesn't feel like a bunch of the soap is just washing away as I wash my hands with this. I didn't really know what to expect because I've never used a pure lard soap before that I know of. I mean, maybe I've bought one in the past and didn't know it. It smells fantastic. That does not feel like it's drying my hands out. It almost feels like it's moisturizing just a little bit. That feels great. Now I'm gonna try the oat milk soap. Now this doesn't have any essential oils in it and has olive oil, lard, and coconut oil. This one definitely has a little bit more lather to it. It suds up just a little bit more. That has a lot more lather to it. Wow. That one doesn't feel drying either. It feels like it's leaving a nice silkiness to my hands. Now, after washing my hands with both soaps, I have to say that I like the feel of my hands equally after I've washed them, rinsed them, and dried them. It doesn't feel like it's stripping my hands of the natural oils. They both feel really good, but I do think I like the lather and the consistency of the honey oat milk soap when I'm actually washing my hands a little bit better than the lard soap, because this feels a little bit more like a traditional soap. The lather feels more what I'm accustomed to, but this felt really good too. Would be totally happy using my lard soap as well, but this has me excited that we were able to successfully make 2 bars of soap. One, very easy, straightforward, no frills, other than the little bit of essential oils. One that is a little bit more involved, and we were successful, which means I am excited to dive into this book and try a bunch of recipes. There are so many fun things you can do according to this book. She teaches you how to not only just follow a recipe, but once you understand the principles of soap making, she has so many different options here of how to create your own bars of soap, how to color your bars of soap, and to become a soap maker that can create custom soaps, which would be fun. Nowhere am I near that level of soap making, but I do feel comfortable that I have 2 successful bars under my belt that I want to dive in and try a bunch more recipes out of this book. Thank you for recommending this book. So many of you, when I said I wanted to become a soap maker, recommended this book. And there's so many soaps that I want to make using, let's see, our garden fresh goodies. Here is a pumpkin soap, here's a tomato soap, there's a carrot soap. There's just a lot of fun ones in here. So I will link this book along with the soap making equipment I used down in the description box if you want to try making your own soap. I think you should. It was a lot of fun, and I'm excited to try all the different soaps in the coming future. So if you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing. If you're new, I'd love to have you around here. Not only do we do fun, random crafts like this, we do a lot of things in the garden. We cook. I'm actually setting up to make 4 different kinds of homemade bagels, and it's going to be a very, very fun day in the kitchen. And if you are returning, thank you again for taking time out of your day to spend time with me in my kitchen. Today was a little different, and I had a lot of fun. If you want to watch more of my videos between now and my next upload, I'll pop a couple there. You can go enjoy. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being you, and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye, friend.